when you're dealing with large scale institutions, there's just all like. You can call that a coup, but actually what that is just a natural tension between executive and a bureaucracy.
When Trump, as the commander-in-chief, says, American forces out, and they say, you got it, boss, don't do it.
Not
they have
the military.
defied the direct order of the duly elected president.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that's a hard coup where the military storms in and seizes power.
Right.
That is coup-ish, where elements of the military have begun to defy the civilian government.
The military doesn't have the leeway. No one in the military has the leeway by the book to say we're not going to do what my superior officer said. And the president is the commander in chief.
But this is also the premise of the book, eh? Like that there's a military, like it's not necessarily a coup. It's just that like what happens with the military this happens all the time in countries falling apart. In countries in civil war, is that the only institution that everyone approves of is the military, right? And I mean, in America, that's just extreme now.
Yeah,
I mean, like no one has any respect for the Supreme Court. Nobody, never mind Congress.
Military's going down.
Well, they're the last one standing in this decline of faith in institutions, decline of faith in the media, decline of faith in the church, right? Decline of faith in local government, decline like. You know, that is the mega trend from you were born what, 1980? No. 86. You're almost exactly the point where the decline of faith in institutions begins. Like your whole life has been a decline of faith in institutions.
Yep.
Right. And
explains me, I guess.
Yeah, it does actually. Like it explains a lot. But the
I mean, I was 13. I was 14 at the 2000 election.
Right. And then you would have been how old? You would have been 22 in the 2008 crash, right, where suddenly the financial system is a rigged game, right? Like these.
I voted for Obama and regretted almost immediately.
These are the effects that these collapses have, right? But you know so you're right that it's sort of it's slower, but when the military, I mean, I feel for them. They're in a very, very difficult position. And they swore an oath to the Constitution. I think they take it with absolute massive seriousness.
I got one for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you familiar with the coup attempt in Turkey several years ago?
Yeah, sure.
So
that was an interesting one.
Right. So this may be at the time outdated because I've not followed up on it.
Yeah.
But the general idea is, I remember I was in some city, I'm doing some interview, and we get word that the Bosphorus Bridge has been occupied by a coup force under certain leaders. A story that emerged was that these young men who served in the Turkish armed forces were given a lawful order to defend the Bosphorus Bridge from a terror attack.
Right.
They showed up, no idea what's going on. Then they were mercilessly beaten and dragged to the street by civilians because it was reported these people were attempting to stage a military coup against Erdogan.
Huh.
So the argument is, in the United States, what may happen? And a lot of people are like, you really think that the armed forces are going to go and round people up or do X or do Y? What will happen, or what could happen, is that there will be a simple lawful order that does not raise alarm bells for any like lower ranking enlisted guy. And they say, we're getting reports of a potential riot, so the National Guard, we're going to have you guys deployed to the streets. And then a bunch of National Guardsmen come out, surround a building because they're like, I guess we're here to defend it. And then the news reports, National Guard stages coup attempt, and these guys everyone points the finger at them, and it could be a mistake. It could be intentional. But the idea is you don't need National Guardsmen or military servicemen to decide to stage a coup. They won't know what they're doing is the coup when they're given a lawful order.
Well, I mean, the first chapter of the next Civil War, I talked to the colonel responsible for drawing up what they call full spectrum operations in the homeland, right? So that's when, they absolutely have, I mean, they have a plan for everything, right? They're the U.S. military. They have a plan for conquering Canada. They have a plan for...
Yes!
They have a plan.
Let's go!
There's no contingency plan that they don't have, right? Like they just sit around.
Well, Canada's rightfully ours. I mean, that's just obvious.
When you need the water, you probably will come. But we
almost got Quebec. We almost did.
Well, when?
1812, I think.
Oh no, you never had a chance. That wasn't us. That was just the British.
Right.
And burned the White House to the ground.
That's it, right.
Trying to do it.
We tried. I think we took Montreal for a little bit. But
well, anyway, you burned Toronto.
Toronto
in 1814. Yeah, you burned Toronto to the ground.
We were so close.
Yeah, you were so close. Well, in the first Civil War, Lincoln's Department of War had, they said, well, we have this army. Why don't we march north and take Canada first? That's why Canada was on the side of the South the whole of the Civil War.
Really?
Right. Because it was like,
I did not know that.
Lincoln, like they made a casual remark, and that event is why we became a country. Right?
Abraham Lincoln's like,
no
Canada, you're
idea.
next.
We were a bunch of colonies, like
Yeah.
sprinkled across the northern part of North America. And then Lincoln's Minister of War was like, should we go take Montreal? And we were like, we better get our ducks in a row. Like, it's time to actually get this shit together. That's why we confederated. That's why we became a country.
Wow,
Right?
but Canada sided with the South?
Yeah, 100%.
Really?
Yeah, so did the British.
Yeah.
They were... I mean, it was just national interest, right?
Yeah, economically, it made more sense for the
Yeah, they
British
were.
side of the South.
Yeah, the cotton was absolutely necessary to the mills in.
Wow.
So
I didn't know about Canada, though.
How many times does America have to kick England's butt?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I also think it makes
they're
sense.
not worth it anymore.
All right, yeah.
I mean,
It makes sense for the British side with the South because it splits the United States.
exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think they were thinking. It was. I mean, they weren't anywhere near that sophisticated. It was just like, we need stuff for our mills.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, in these scenarios where the military is the last holder of value, I mean, that's where you get really nightmare scenarios for the military, right? Like, they're faced with choices that are extremely bad. I mean, that's the point of this book, and the point of the next Civil War is, like, it's not to think about this as like good guys, bad guys. It's like, actually what you're dealing are people who are faced with terrible choices and terrible incentives.
Did you ever read about what happened in Egypt with the first and second revolutions 10 years ago?
No, I didn't.
The scary thing is, and again,
Well, I read some of it, but I don't know what part.
it's been a very long time since I've been involved. Everybody knows, I bring it up quite a bit, that I was there.
Oh
during
yeah,
the Second
Were you there?
Revolution.
Oh really?
Yeah, I think it was like July 4th even, which is kind of crazy. But
Like Tahrir Square, that stuff.
Tahrir, yeah, I was I was actually watching the revolution take place, the Apaches flying over,
Oh my God.
and the APCs. So what happens is you have a country ruled by the military for a very long time. People eventually say it's time for elections. We want change. Majority of the country is secular, and they do not want Islamic rule or theocracy.
Right.
What happens then is they say, let's have an election. There are like 10 different parties, 9 of which are secular, and 1 is the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, guess what? In a first past the post voting system, whoever gets the most votes wins. The Muslim Brotherhood gets 20%, everyone else gets 9%, and then the Muslim Brotherhood wins.
Right.
So a year later, another revolution takes place against the Muslim Brotherhood. Once again, it looks like the Muslim Brotherhood is going to win the elections. Even ousting the president is not going to change the fact the largest voting bloc is Muslim. So the military goes and starts executing and massacring Muslims.
Right.
They start going to where these protests are happening and just gunning people down.
Yeah.
Because the military's thought was this country will never stabilize so long as this group exists.
Right.
So they decide, for the sake of the 80%, we're going to shut down violently and oppressively the 20%. It's a way more complicated than that, and this is probably outdated, just to be clear.
Yeah, but also, like, the number one, like, when you look at the metrics, the number one attribute that leads to having a coup is that you've had one before, right? Like, and the more that you have them, the more that you're likely to have them.
Because
right?
people see it.
Because people see it and they understand it as a political choice, right? But, so that's not really that's not on the cards for the United States, right? Like, that's not something, like,
Civil War is.
but Civil War is.
We've had one of those before.
We've had 2, right? The first one was the Revolution.
Right.
Right. And so it is absolutely built into the DNA of the country to have these kind of civil wars. But the role of the military won't be, taking the other side and executing them. I just don't see, as pessimistic as some of this stuff is, that's just very on the extreme edge of unlikelihood. What is much more likely is that they're in a constant struggle to impose order on a country that is in political and hyperpartisan chaos.
Similar to Syria, right? So like
that would be the worst, or between Ireland and Syria. Right, like
I'm not sure what you're talking about with Ireland, the troubles and stuff. Okay.
Yeah, like where Syria would be the ultra worst, where you're dealing with death squads.
So wait, our best case scenario is the Troubles.
Well, you're already past the Troubles.
We don't have
you're
combat in the street, though.
Pardon me?
We don't have gunfights in the street over politics.
Yes, we do.
I'm talking about high level gunfights. And I understand there have been fights where people are throwing Molotovs and stuff, but I'm talking about dudes actually like setting up L-shaped ambushes on opposing forces.
White power people go into black churches and kill everybody in the name of a political cause. Like, I'm sorry, that's like that.
And real quick, for the people screaming partisanship, I think we'll just also bring up the trans shooter who went to the Christian school,
or the riots in 2020.
Yeah, but
right. Like
that's still, I understand, but the point that I'm making is that's still different between like militarized units making actual attacks on like a police station to kill everybody and take the location.
It's just